Right, yeah. Good evening. For the Weekend Research Project, we welcome you. My name is Robert Gadomski. I'm here with my colleague, John Shear. This week we have rising tensions in the Middle East, fiscal cliff debates, and the beginning of the 2016 presidential campaign with stops by Chris Christie and Marco Rubio. John is going to talk with us about the fiscal cliff. John?
Well, I mean, I think the central question is whether or not the Democrats are going to go over the fiscal cliff. For those not too familiar with the fiscal cliff, it started in the last debt ceiling debate, where the two parties came together and essentially agreed that we're going to set up this committee. They're going to design sequestering, and they're going to design certain things will expire and certain things will take effect, such as sequestering of military spending, the expiration of the tax cuts. Both sides agreed to essentially take the political heat off of themselves until after the presidential election. And so in January, it's set for all these cuts that they agreed on to take effect: the sequestration of military spending, the Bush-era tax cuts expire, the alternative minimum tax expiring, and basically, if it happens, it's going to raise taxes for everyone. I think the average is $3,500 for middle-class Americans. And the question really, essentially, is here: are they going to come to a compromise before, or from a Democratic strategy perspective, is it better for them to go over the fiscal cliff? Because essentially, they can go over the fiscal cliff. The taxes go up for everybody, and then they can come back and say to Republicans, we want a middle-class tax cut. And then if the Republicans refuse, they'll paint them in a light that they're going to they're anti-middle class.
Well, the Republicans wouldn't refuse out of nowhere. When you say that, you act like the Republicans are going to say, to help the economy, we need to raise taxes on everyone. That's not true. What the Republicans would say is, yeah, that's not true. What Republicans would say is, we would like to cut taxes on everybody, or leave tax cuts in on everybody, not raise taxes on the top 1% at all, because you don't take disposable income out of those who spend money during a recession. So this idea that, you say Republicans would hold the country hostage.
Well, I didn't say that today.
Well, people have said that, where Republicans would hold the country hostage over tax cuts for the wealthy. And in the end, Democrats should be seen as doing the same thing, as holding these middle-class tax cuts hostage over not getting income from the wealthy.
Well, I mean, the exit polls overwhelmingly show that Americans are in favor of raising taxes on the wealthy. So I think that the Democrats see it as a mandate, and they're going to pursue it, because if they don't pursue it, it's going to look like it was an empty campaign promise. So hopefully, if they might agree to revenue increases. They've already said that they would agree to those, but it's not clear if those loopholes are going to be enough. If they're going to be enough to have any kind of effect. But when we also talk about sequestration and cutting spending, you're also pulling money out of the economy when you do that. I mean, to say that it's not that pulling billions of dollars out of the government system is not going to have an effect on the economy, it's also a fallacy. I mean, either way, you can increase if you increase taxes, maybe you'll have a small effect. Although a report from the Congressional Research Service said there's no correlation between economic growth and tax cuts for the wealthy. So I think, and the question I wonder always is, because we've debated taxes on this program numerous times, where do we draw the line here, though? What happens in 5 years if there's another economic crisis? And do we lower taxes again? Every time there's an economic crisis, we keep lowering, lowering, lowering?
I feel a lot of that has to do with what caused the problem to begin with. A couple of years ago, we experienced a stock market bust where the market went down to 7,000, and people were wondering whether they'd be able to get their money out of the ATM, or if there would be milk on the shelves on Monday morning. And I feel like that was the type of situation that we've never seen before, caused not just by Bush. It was 30 years in the making. There was a bill in 1979 that had to do with housing and minorities and everyone owning a house, and then so many things led up to that. It was deregulation. It was artificially low interest rates. It was the Fed artificially lowering interest rates. So you have something that you've never seen before. You can't. Eric Cantor went to a meeting with Barack Obama and Democratic leadership right after Obama had a huge victory and Democrats had a huge victory in the 2008 elections. And he brought a bill a list of things to do to spur the economy. And I don't know whether this was just for political reasons, but it was maybe cut this tax, cut this tax, cut this tax. Any spending and stimulus would have to be offset by a tax cut, so it became revenue neutral for the government. And, I look at that and I say, we're not in a situation we've been in before. That's why I have always argued that the stimulus was too small. If you're in something that you've never been in before, you know what? It's like you have to throw a Hail Mary pass. You don't have time to just, 5-yard pass, 5-yard pass, 8-yard pass. Stimulus package was $789 billion original cost before the interest rates on the money borrowed. I argue it should have been maybe 1 to 2, 1.3 billion, and it should have been all spent in that year. I think if that were to happen, Obama would have won re-election. Maybe all 50 states, or maybe...
Well, I agree with you. I think that the stimulus could have been bigger. I think it could have been better. And if it's revenue neutral, I don't really see how it stimulates the economy.
And when I say it should, we've never seen this before. In 5 years, if we have another deep recession, bordering off the cliff, going into a depression, it depends why. Are people's tax rates too high? Is it too high because the normal middle-class person doesn't have enough disposable income? I throw this formula at you a lot to spend money so that when they go to Walmart's, when they go to Best Buy, they could buy milk, they could buy orange juice, they could buy meat, they could buy a turkey.
Yeah, well,
not at the same time, obviously, but they don't have enough to go buy the TV.
When you say we haven't seen this before, yeah, we haven't seen a recession that's this deep. But
we've never seen anything like we saw in 2000.
But we have seen other recessions. I mean, you had...
No, we've never seen anything like we saw in 2000.
But we've had other recessions. We had a recession when Reagan took office.
We had a recession in 1980 during the Carter years, with stagflation.
And he cut spending. And he said he was going to cut spending.
He cut government spending,
cut taxes,
raised military spending.
But what happened was it never generated enough growth to pay off the deficit. We had a ballooning in the deficit, and that helped trigger another recession under Bush Sr., who had to raise taxes.
However, Ronald Reagan was the president during some of the best times of economic growth in American history.
Yes, but it wasn't a long-term growth. It was a deficit-fueled growth, arguably. And then you had a recession, and Bush Sr. had infamously
Moronically.
said,
not infamously, moronically,
had to raise them. And then we had a recession again in 2001.
And then you give Bill Clinton credit for...
But I'm saying Bush then reduced taxes again. It created it helped contribute to another temporary bubble of growth, which was artificial.
Bush raised taxes, and then it was followed by a recession, which cost him office against Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
So raising taxes brings us into a recession, is what you just told me.
No, I'm saying there was a recession and a deficit, and that caused him to have to raise taxes.
And it was followed by...
It was followed by...
It wasn't followed by a depression like the 1930s.
It wasn't followed by...
But in 1993, the economy wasn't doing well. That's why Republicans had the gains at the 1994 midterms.
But I'm saying the deficit that was caused by Reagan helped trigger the recession that caused Bush Sr. to have to raise taxes. And then you had Clinton. And okay, there was... I'm not arguing that there was an artificial bubble that Clinton created too. But then we had another recession, and then they cut taxes again. And that...
When was this other recession? Under
2001.
When George W. Bush took office, when the tech bubble burst.
And he replaced it with another artificial bubble, which was
we also had
by lower interest rates.
We also had an event titled September 11th, and that contributed a lot to the recession of the early decade that we just passed.
But I'm saying the way he got out of the recession...
The largest single market, I apologize for interrupting, but the largest single market loss before the 2008 housing bubble crisis was on that Monday following September 11th.
Well, I'm not talking about the cause of that recession, but I'm talking about how Bush, to get out of that recession, he cut taxes. But the taxes never generated, because the argument always is you cut taxes, people spend money, the disposable income creates more jobs, which creates more growth. But you have to create more growth than you lost from cutting those taxes to have any kind of gain. And that never happened.
Well, Bush never offset it.
He never offset it. And then
Bush, the government was spending the same amount of money when it was taking in under Clinton, more obviously with the war, with the foreign wars and the Patriot Act and the Homeland Security measures that we had to take after that. So the government was spending the same amount of money while it was taking in less. We don't mean, Republicans argue that you take in less money, you give the money to the people, and the government spends less. However, liberals don't like to hear this. I don't blame them, but we had periods, 45 months of economic growth. Do not get me wrong, that a lot of that was fueled by the artificial housing bubble. But when you have close to 4 years of economic growth, the market rising to unprecedented levels, let's say besides the artificial one, let's say just the regular growth. You like to think that Bush raised taxes in 2001 and 2003, post September 11th. And then
Not raised, he could have maintained the Clinton rates.
Bush cut taxes, and
Nobody was even
I made a
asking
mistake
for it.
there. George W. Bush cut taxes in 2003, post September 11th, when the United States economy dipped into a recession, partially from the tech bubble burst, partially from September 11th, and we were in a recession until 2011 when Barack Obama's stimulus package finished. Completely untrue and a fallacy. We had moments of economic growth from middle 2003 until 2007, when gas prices became high.
I'm not debating economic growth, but the thing was, it wasn't enough economic growth to make up for the loss of revenue. That's what I'm saying.
I completely agree that George W. Bush did spend too much money and did not cut enough government spending.
But I'm saying, what I'm saying basically is we've done that under Reagan, it increases the deficit. We've done that under Bush, it increases the deficit. It does, so now we're told that if we do it again, it's going to work again. But every time we do it, we lose more revenue. And we don't get the growth that we're told we're going to get. So,
what growth that we're told we're going to get? If you have this number that Ronald Reagan said we would get this growth and we didn't get it, what number are we
don't get the
speaking of?
growth to offset the loss in revenue.
You mean people don't pay enough in income taxes to offset what they...
Because when you cut taxes, you lose a certain amount of income. The government loses revenue. So what you're banking on essentially is that the loss of revenue, more people are going to spend more money. It's going to generate more tax revenue, and it's going to increase. But you're already in a hole. You lose revenue. You're already down. You have to make up for that and gain some. And I just never see that happen.
You need to work on the economic unemployment level first before working on a deficit. Even though Republicans ran on the deficit, I really never debated. I've never been a deficit hawk on this show. I've never said, you know what, you can't raise taxes, we need to get the deficit down. I don't work like that. I think you need to look at what's important first, and that's getting the economy back to where we're not threatened on a double-dip recession. The market is lost. The market has been down, some days more than others, and 6.
Well, that has a lot to do with the fact that Greece is on the brink of default in Europe. I mean, that's playing a big role, because if that happens,
and it has a lot to do with people dumping stock because of the fear that capital gains rates are going to be doubled, and they're going to be taxed less to sell off their stock now than they would be when capital gains rates were to double.
Well,
that always has a lot. If you're an investor and you could sell your stock now and get taxed at this rate, or sell your stock possibly next year, maybe your stock goes up, the economy improves, but if you sell it, the rate's going to be higher. You almost have to just...
We have to think about the long-term economy here. I mean, okay, yeah, there'll be a temporary sell-off, but people aren't going to just stop buying stocks because the rate goes up. I mean, I think we'll see, you'll see a temporary sell-off, but then next year when everything calms down, and it's uncertainty also, and that's on both parties.
There was uncertainty before the election, because you didn't know whether the Affordable Care Act, what would be left there, whether Republicans would take all of it out, whether the regulations, whether Mitt Romney would come in and whatnot, and what he would do. Now, Barack Obama won the second term. It's not uncertainty anymore. Obamacare is in. People aren't hiring full-time employees because the Obamacare mandate is in. The regulations are in. We don't have a conservative president. We have a more liberal president who, not having to worry about a second-term election, if there's a liberal agenda, he can do it.
But there's still uncertainty whether or not that's actually going to happen, because if it happens, you can plan for it. But they don't know that necessarily all the aspects of Obamacare are going to be implemented, because Congress can refuse to pay for it. State governors can refuse to set up the necessary exchanges. So there is uncertainty.
But small businesses aren't hiring